So the feds are investigating SpaceX, one of those interesting companies brought to us by Elon Musk. And they're doing this under the premise that SpaceX prefers to hire Americans over non-US citizens. Now, I don't really buy this explanation, and I really don't think you should either. Because I'm sick of the fake morality, the phony explanations, and just all the charades being played for us. No, the real reason that Elon Musk is being investigated, and I know SpaceX is the company being investigated, but if you make SpaceX miserable, you make Elon Musk miserable. And Elon has been a threat to the prevailing narratives, to the conjured up voodoo narrative cast by the ethereal powers of news media in Washington, D.C. And as we look at this story, I want us to examine Galatians 5:15, which says, "If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another." So don't yoke yourself to political parties or even celebrities, but we do need to watch the fruits of things going on in the world. So as we talk about Elon Musk, we're not making him out to be an idol or anything like that, but within reason, we're just going to examine the fruits of this situation. Aside from the ideological war of reality, which is legitimately going on right now, we're also seeing the old evil come back where there's one group of people who have special access to power, truth, and just the general reins of societal control, and everybody else is just a peasant who does the will of those people, regardless of how smart or dumb their leaders are. And this is a really sad thing. In modern America, this is not just about right versus left, though there's a lot of stuff going on, right versus left. There is a problem of the prevailing narrative versus we the people. There's those who are of the establishment that like the prevailing narrative. They don't like that to be challenged, and that is set in opposition to we the people. Now, Elon Musk, even though he's a wealthy man, and one of the wealthiest on this planet, he has showed fruits that he tends to stand more with we the people than the prevailing narrative. And that's why he's being investigated. It's that simple. So, I don't like to accept the premise of stuff given to me, especially when it's such a farce like it is with this SpaceX investigation. But I do want to take the topic of U.S. workers, American citizens versus non-U.S. workers, and use that as an opportunity to actually talk about why we have national borders. I know that may seem like a little bit of a disconnect, but on the conversation of why we would even hire American citizens and why our economy might want to have businesses and things here rather than have, shoes made in China, I think it's a time for us to shed some light on that. Because often we hear the argument made that the only reason you want national borders is because you're mean and hateful, you hate people who are different, and you want to keep them out. But that's not really true. In fact, I want to give you an argument of some substance to go against this. One of the reasons why we have national borders is for a restraint against evil, because you actually want to help the poor. You want to keep people from being slaves in sweatshops. For the last few months, I've been trying to buy some new shoes to wear around the house. I'm a little bit like Fred Rogers. I come home and take my light jacket off and put on a different set of shoes to wear in the house. These pair of Pumas are pretty worn out. As you can see, they've kind of come apart. I've been trying to replace them, but haven't been able to find a pair of shoes made in America. I wanted to buy some shoes that aren't made by slaves in sweatshops, and that's just really been a hard task. Basically, all the shoes for the entire world are made in sweatshops, with very, very rare exceptions. And this really is a serious, serious problem. And national borders are actually a restraint against this. Regardless of what people say about globalism, globalism is the ultimate form of worldliness. It's the ultimate worldly thinking. And you can insert the Ben Shapiro meme. Where does it say that? It's in the name globalism. It's in the name. Globalism, the ultimate worldliness. The world, the globe, it is the goal. The only reason that you can actually have people make shoes in sweatshops in China, why you can do this to people, to keep them in such abject poverty, is because there are things in place which make the shoes and ship them around the world. If a town, a village, has 1,000 people, and they're making shoes for those 1,000 people, you're not going to have the need or the ability really to make a sweatshop. And if you do have some tyrannical people in charge of things, well, they're only going to be able to be tyrannical to that 1,000 people, and that group of 1,000 has a lot better chance of holding the one accountable on the small scale than if there are millions of people who are thousands of miles away from their leaders, who are kept in, palaces and ivory towers which are well armed. Evil is easier restrained the smaller the scale is. If you've got a mayor of a city of 100 and that mayor is evil, well, they're limited in their evil reach, and also it's easier to hold them accountable. The reason why we want national borders is to keep things restrained. We don't want there to be slaves making shoes in sweatshops, and having smaller local economies helps with that. It actually helps a lot with that. Now, it is good that nations trade with one another. That generally keeps them from going to war, but there has to be a proper order of things. Things have to be kept in their proper place. Because having shoes made in the sweatshops, one, that messes up the local economy there in Vietnam or China, wherever it may be. But it also just puts everything off kilter. If there's a cobbler, a shoemaker, working in a village of 1,000, he's going to make shoes that fit the price range of that. And if he doesn't, he'll go out of business. The market forces are better suited when things are more readily accountable on that small scale. When you look at the EU and the UK, Britain has decided to leave the EU, and a lot of people have said, oh, it's because they're mean and they hate the French. No. They were tired of people in Brussels telling them what to do with their toasters without any ability to actually hold the people in Brussels accountable. If the people in Brussels at the EU decide that the Britons are going to do something, well, then they have to do it. They don't have any way of saying no. If they're subject to tyranny, they don't have any way of saying no to that. And people are naturally sinful. We need restraints against evil. And if we want to help build up nations, we do that by sowing seeds of upward aspirations, not by just creating these giant global structures which have no accountability. They're not actually subject to market forces. They're not subject to the checks and balances and the freedom which the gospel has in store for us. Instead, it's just the evil of devouring one another. It's terrible that shoes are made by sweatshops in China. I think it's just a horrendous evil. But that's what globalism brings you. When you don't have limits on national sovereignty, when you don't try to keep economies on a scale that actually corresponds to the people who participate in that economy, then things collapse. Since the fall, there have been exactly 0 utopias, 0 perfect nations. So we're not going to have a utopia. That's why the preamble to the Constitution looks for a more perfect union. All right, so I want to wrap this up. I know I've already spent a little bit more time here than I wanted to. I want us to go back to Galatians 5 and tie all this back together. Galatians 5, beginning in verse 13, it says, "For you are called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. However, if you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another." The globalist stuff does bite and devour itself. And there's no way to stop the biting. There's no way to stand against a massive company like Facebook. They're not just here to do business as usual, to be the capitalistic entrepreneur. They're here to rule you and to have sovereignty over you. Real freedom is freedom from the inescapable burdens that place themselves on our shoulders, and we need tools to help restrain that. In national borders, there are a restraint against things like sweatshops and horrible evil like that. So, one of the things that I want us to close with is pray for evil to expose itself. I know that sounds crazy, and I don't want us to pray for condemnation, but when things start devouring themselves, eyes start to be opened. Let's get busy reviving or get busy bowing. The more things are out in the open, the more they're in broad daylight, the closer we are to truth. And even when someone like the federal agents are going to say, well, we're investigating them for that, it's like when we saw the stocks with GameStop. It's so obviously corrupt that the prevailing narrative, it can't spin a lie that good. And if liars are going to lie, get them to tell ridiculous lies, because that helps open people's eyes. All right, so there's that. I hope this has been useful to you. I am Pastor J. Dylan Proctor. This is the Nazarene Stream Preacher. God love you, and have a blessed day.